Amanda, I just want to say I'm so glad that you could join me today, as you're a therapist from my office, and specifically that you are a marriage and family therapist, a licensed marriage and family therapist, as well as the head of training and development at my office. So obviously, I'm a big fan of yours. And
I appreciate it.
yeah, I mean, well, easy to do. And I originally wanted to talk to you about couples and families and COVID. And then, coincidentally, it also now has just come up that I'm going to be doing a pretty big presentation actually on the topic. And so I'm more excited than ever to just talk through with you some of the ideas that I have about couples and families in COVID, and also to steal your best ideas too.
Hey, I'm happy to help if I can.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited to get your ideas and to share mine. And, together we might even, end up coming up with some new ideas.
Yeah.
Just to confirm, of course, although we may be talking about cases and people that we're working with, of course, we're going to change or anonymize, details. We're not going to share any identifying information.
Yep.
I know you know that, but I'm just saying that in case anyone listening to this is saying, oh, gee, like, are they supposed to be talking like this?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to confirm that you and I are both, very ethical professionals that are very careful, of course, about confidentiality.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, with all of that said, I would love to hear from you, if you have any ideas or challenges or anything you can share on the topic.
Sure. So in terms of, so obviously this is all relatively new. So it's a little early to maybe be seeing patterns. So what I might say is I'm seeing themes in the last few weeks about how this pandemic has kind of created a really exacerbated or magnified pre-existing relationship dynamics. So if the couple was already struggling with boundary setting, now being quarantined together where getting privacy isn't that easy, especially if you're staying at home in a teeny tiny New York City apartment, and that's already challenging enough to, you're seeing this, the way that the couple traditionally dealt with it now coming out even more. How folks communicate, conflict resolution. It's really just exacerbated it. And I suppose you could say that the optimistic view of that is it provides a good opportunity to practice some of the skills that we had been talking about in our sessions together, especially because we don't know how long this is going to be going on for. Folks have a lot of opportunities to try, fail, learn from it, and grow from it.
Yeah.
And especially with the absence of usual resources, which makes it all the more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm a wife and mother myself, and I know you are too. You have
Yep.
two little ones.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know we're all, having our own version of this. So I do think it's important, for myself and I imagine for you on a certain level. I find that actually, being in a marriage and being a mom is actually a big resource right now, and feeling, a sense of empathy with what people are going through sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I think even just being thrown out of a routine and being the mom of two kids where they're at an age where routine is extremely important and you disrupt that and everything gets disrupted. So I know everybody's lives are in upheaval right now. And for me, having three other people's routines disrupted, especially two who don't really understand what is going on, has made it so much more challenging. And again, I see the benefits of being quarantined together. There's an upside and a downside to whether you're quarantining or alone or with kids, but either way, the disruption of the routine seems to be one of the most pervasive problems that people are encountering, that tends to get minimized in the face of what if I got sick, life or death. But I think this is just as pervasive, problematic. We
Mhm.
just don't recognize it as much unless you've got little kids screaming in your face.
Yeah, yeah. So you brought up a topic that I'm thinking about a lot, which is that the kids really, at a certain age, they're not even cognitively capable of understanding it. And we
Mm-hmm.
certainly don't want to give them information that could just confuse them or frighten them unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious if you don't mind sharing
Sure.
either like what you're, kind of doing with yours or what
Mm-hmm.
other people have been doing with theirs or, thoughts that you have about it. I'm interested in that.
Yeah, I haven't had to really discuss it with my kids as much. I mean, my daughter is 7 months, so she's really out of it. The only way that where it's affected my son is that some of the traditional outlets, like going to the playground or going to a store, being able to get down and run around, because he's not very great at listening, and social distancing is just, I think, a little beyond his capability. It's confusing to him, but he's also at an age where after a short amount of time, he kind of takes it in stride. So I know that some folks with older kids have either turned to resources. Like I saw there was actually a Sesame Street episode about this, which I was planning on checking out, even though it's a little past my kids' comprehension.
Hmm.
But finding, some more age appropriate ways to introduce them to these ideas of what is going on. I've even seen other parents out and about walking with slightly older kids saying, got to create space. They almost make it a game, like 6 feet. How many of your brother and sister's lengths is that? They almost make it a game
Mm-hmm.
to make it less scary.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I mean, I think also making it a game actually creates a sense of interaction, even with the people that you're distancing from, that,
Mhm.
you're cooperating together in creating that distance as opposed to just making it like get those people away from us or like let's just
Right.
stay away from people. I like the community aspect of that
Mhm.
idea because that's what it actually is our community is uniting in
Yep.
distance.
Exactly. And I think it's also helpful from a my I have a toddler, so he's at a bit of a boundary pushing stage, and the best way to get him to do something is to make it a game where he wants to do it rather than give him a flat out no, and then all he's going to do is try to push it as far as he possibly can. And this is pretty serious, so we don't really want to let him do that.
Yeah. And how old is your son again?
He's going on 3, two and
And
a
when
half
will
to 3.
okay, so
July.
he'll be
Yeah,
3 in July. Time flies. Yeah.
it
Mine is
does.
3.5 now. He's gonna be 4 in December.
Big
Um,
kid.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I've been doing with my son, and I was doing this anyway, but I'm doing it even now more with COVID. And, sometimes people are surprised. And so I'm curious if this is going to surprise you, Amanda, just because, again, with your particular knowledge and background, I'm just curious. But sometimes people are surprised to know that my son has chores and he does them and he has a chart and checks them off and he actually does them very well. He vacuums. He
Oh
actually really,
my God.
he's a great, he loves it, he does. And, so every day he has to vacuum, certain rooms of our house. And, he does need an adult, of course, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
stand behind him. But the progress that he's made, just by doing it every day and having an adult behind him
Mm-hmm.
has helped. And I motivate him by, for example, if there's a toy he wants to play with or something he wants to do, I'll tell him, sure, absolutely. As soon as you do your chores, you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And then if he tries to do the chores in a way that's like sloppy or unfocused, which of course, even I'll do my own quote chores, in a way
Yeah.
that's sloppy or unfocused. Sometimes I'm not faulting him for that. But
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, of course, it's like, it's my job to teach him. And so if
Right.
he's not doing it, in the way that I think he's really capable of doing it and that it, should be done, is I'll say, Billy, you have to do it nicely. If you want
Mm-hmm.
to get the rewards, if you want to put, he loves to go check, check, check. That's like if he puts checks,
Oh.
he says, I want to do the check, check, check. He actually really just loves making the check
Oh.
marks. And I say, if you want to do the check, 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 you're going to have to do it nicely. You don't have to do it if you don't want to vacuum, like it's okay, but you cannot do the check, 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 and you're not going to get, your reward or whatever it is that he wants. And so I make it up to him. So I find, to me, it's almost like, how they say, like, if you have like something heavy and you have to move it, it's smart to find a way to like let gravity do the work, if you can find some way. And I find that for me, that's the equivalent of like letting gravity do the work by creating some kind of a motivator for him, so that I'm never saying to him, you vacuum that floor. It's more like I'm just saying, what, if you don't want to do it, no problem. But you're just not doing your check, check, check. And, you're not getting your special toy then, and then he wants to do it.
I think that's fantastic. My son loves to put things away. I think a lot of that came out of modeling. My husband and I, a couple of years, definitely drank the Marie Kondo Kool-Aid, and we just became very enthusiastic about tidying our space. And our son watched that, and so now he sometimes won't go out the door to go play outside, even though he's been asking for it, until he puts his toy car away or his toy bus away. And he'll actually get upset if we stop him.
Yeah.
So he enjoys picking up. So sometimes we ask him to do it, and that's usually when some of the bribery comes in of like, if you want me to make cookies, or if you want this, like, put your toys away first. Or he likes to take the DVDs out of our cabinet, put the DVDs away. And if he wants to do it, great. And if he doesn't do it, just no cookies.
Right. I think that's really great. And, you're touching on something else too, that I feel like has been almost like a funny point of controversy that I'm actually excited to clarify, when I, potentially do this workshop, or, just different ways of the fact that you are connecting food with chores. And I do that too. For example, whether it be chores or also with learning. So my son is doing Hooked on Phonics, and by the way, I totally recommend it. He's like literally reading words and like spelling them, and I mean, he's only 3.5, and I cannot believe it. And I love it. I love doing it with him, and it brings us close, because I'm such a verbal person. I'm a psychologist, so I love to have words and talk and read, and I love all that stuff, and it's so awesome that he's doing it. But of course, sometimes like a reading lesson can be a little bit challenging, and I personally actually don't really give him any sugar. I'm not like phobic about it, like he'll have birthday cake or whatever, but I just don't like just give sugar without kind of thinking about it. And so I have this bag of jelly beans, and they're just mini jelly beans. And what I'll do is, if we're kind of at a point in the reading lesson where it's a tough one, I'll say, look, Billy, if you finish this reading lesson, you can have a jelly bean. And I'm like literally giving him a jelly bean. And he has, to do 15 minutes of work to get that jelly bean, and it's hard work. But he'll do it, and he's very excited to get the jelly bean. And I have almost felt like sheepish about sharing that, because I feel like many people will say like, oh, well, you should never use food as a reward. And, that's setting the kid up for control and food issues and stuff. And I really want to dispel that belief. I personally think, and I'm curious what you think. And of course, I always welcome, disagreement. I don't feel like everyone has to think the same. But from my perspective, the way I see parents maybe that don't really have a deep and exquisite understanding of mind and motivation and attachment and love, that they might just kind of simply say, okay, well, certainly there are ways where you could use food as a motivator, as a reward, or as a punishment where it's been negative, like where mom says, if you don't eat that second helping of food that I made for you, then obviously you don't love me.
Right. Right.
Like that, that there, or certainly to say, son, you're not getting any dinner if you don't,
Mhm.
do what
Mhm.
you're supposed to do or whatever. Like there's obviously like totally negative ways. Another
Yeah.
negative way, I just want to make it very clear in case anyone listening to this ever, kind of gets ideas about what they might try. I just want to say another thing I would never do is I would never, use food as a reward to stop a tantrum, right?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I've seen parents do that, and it bothers me because it's actually incentivizing more tantrums and
Yep.
like all the stuff that that it works in the reverse in a positive way if he gets a jelly bean for doing a hard
A
reading
good thing.
lesson.
Mhm.
But I would never, like if he were going to have a tantrum, I would never say, if you stop crying, I'll give you a jelly bean. You know what I mean?
Right,
Like
right.
never do that, but
No,
as a
I
motivator
agree.
for a special, effort, then I actually think that it's kind of nice to
Mhm.
connect the idea even that you do earn a special reward and that it's okay that a special treat can come in the form of food, a special small morsel of jelly bean.
Right. And I mean, I'm the same way with it. My specialty had never been so much in, child development, even though I got like, some background of that in grad school. But, in a lot of ways, like I'm winging it with kids and being a mom. But my feelings about it more from like a personal standpoint is I don't see anything wrong with using food as a reward, especially if you're using other things. It's not just the only, you know, reward that's there. Like if you want to take them outside afterwards, or if you do this, we'll go to the playground or whatever it is, and you're providing other things. Like I don't really see anything wrong with it. I actually think that a tiny sugary treat or something that tastes good is like doubly rewarded because not only am I getting something that signifies I did a good job, but it just tastes really good. We have that actual like physical response. Sugar feels good.
Mm.
And it's kind of going back to what you were saying before about like letting gravity do the work. Like this is something that built in physically human beings already respond to. Kids are going to respond to it really well. And I think in moderation, it's fine. But that's my
Yeah.
personal opinion.
I do think moderation is the key. Yeah. And that's why I have to laugh. Like he's doing all this work for one jelly bean.
One jelly
It's kind of
bean.
funny. But I wanted to follow up on something else that you said. And as always, if you see me looking down, it's always I'm just looking at some notes I'm writing from when you're speaking.
Mhm.
You had said earlier that this magnified that you noticed in pre-existing boundary dynamics for
Mhm.
couples or families. Can you talk about any of that in a solution oriented way of like some of the things that you're doing that are working to help people with that?
I think, when a lot of the times, because the clients that I'm working with right now, I've been working with before all of this happened, we were already maybe focusing on self-awareness and personal accountability when it comes to healthy boundaries, and that can include work-life balance. And especially right now with parents with kids, that's going to be really important. My husband and I are tag teaming working and parenting, so there has to be really good communication and boundary setting around that. So in a lot of respects, it's almost reinforcing what we had already been talking about in the sessions. How do you constructively communicate to somebody that I need, maybe I need 5 extra minutes before I go into my meeting for work to really kind of like decompress and put my work hat on. And so I understand that, you were meeting up until the very last minute, and sometimes meetings go over, but now the situation's different and we maybe need a little bit more buffer time. So a lot of it is really about implementing what we had already been talking about. One thing that has been helpful, especially for couples if they maybe don't have kids and they have a little bit more time, like some quiet time, is to use this situation as an opportunity for a lot of self-reflection and noticing your reaction internally before you choose your response. And so rather that, I know this has engendered a lot of helplessness in people, that this just kind of came on really quickly and we're all scrambling. But now that this is settling into an ongoing thing, we have to actually kind of take a look at, all right, now we can choose our response. We can come out of crisis mode, and that means out of reactivity. So journaling is a big one. Knowing your own defense mechanisms and vocalizing it in a safe way to the other person have been things that we've been doing before, but this whole situation has just provided, again, so many opportunities to test it out.
Yeah, yeah. So definitely asking clearly for what you need or want,
Mm-hmm.
and taking a moment to notice your reaction before responding. And I think that's a really good one to do. What we call in psychology is, to narrate your experience, to your partner, to be able to kind of zoom out for a moment when you feel yourself getting triggered, and to actually say to your partner, you know what, I feel myself, just getting a little triggered. I don't know exactly what even, maybe I've just got cabin fever here. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just take a moment and just journal kind of like what you said, what I said, I've tried to figure out what I'm feeling. And then let me come back to you. And maybe it'll even just be out of my mind entirely, but let me just take a moment and figure this out and find some words. And
Mm-hmm.
yes, journaling is definitely a good one. Now, I'm going to ask you a hard question, Amanda, and it's
Okay.
okay if you don't know the answer, obviously.
Go for it.
But this is just a question that I think a lot of people are struggling with.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's a family or a couple, and you're in a small space, how do we find personal time, personal space?
Mm-hmm.
One of the tips, for example, just, I don't want to make you feel like you're all alone in that
Oh,
question,
sure,
because
sure.
it's a hard question, I know, but
Absolutely.
one of the things that I think can help sometimes is, even just things like noise canceling headphones,
Mm-hmm.
because we have couples, of course, where they're both working from home. And what if they're
Yeah.
both on an important call at the same time? And then
Right.
it feels like you're trying to have a phone call with Grand Central Station in the background,
Yeah.
so, or even just that you're trying to write a report and your partner is on the phone. So I find that noise canceling headphones,
Mm-hmm.
while also playing in them like nature sounds or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
will, give me extra space. I'm thankfully not in a place right now where that's such an issue, but when I was a graduate student, I had to share the
Mm-hmm.
graduate student study lounge, and it was so hard to get anything
Oh.
done. And so that was one thing that I did. But if you have any tips or ideas, I'm all ears.
Sure. I mean, some folks are getting very resourceful with the space that they have. I've talked to some couples where, it's getting nice outside. So very fortunately, if this was going to happen, at least it's not the dead of winter. So some folks are actually taking their laptop out on the fire escape and using it as an opportunity to actually like get out of the apartment. And so it helps doubly in not only giving them some privacy and like a more private workspace, but it's also an opportunity to get out. Even if it's not that far, just being outside and feeling the air can make a big difference for many people who are kind of struggling with the claustrophobia of being in the city in a small space. I've had others who have taken it out into a lobby area if they need to. And one thought that I had is, part of what's made this so hard for both individuals and couples is that many of them are deprived of whatever their coping skills used to be. If it had been going to the gym or going for a run, they may not have the opportunities to do that anymore. So, one exercise that I've been doing with a lot of people is like coming up with creative new ways to help them decompress. We can maybe take a look at, learn from the old, like what was it about running that felt so cathartic or felt so good? Was it helping you to burn off excess energy, or was it actually helping to clear your mind? If it's helping to clear your mind, can we find some other mind clearing activities? Is it meditation, deep breathing, something like that to help kind of meet the need that's no longer being met? And so depending on what that is, one thought is that both partners in a couple could come up with their own lists and then stagger that. So you're still kind of going off into your own space. If I want to do mindfulness, and that's the time that my husband chooses to make a business call and he actually has some control over that, we could actually have a conversation in the morning about when am I going to do my meditation and I can kind of have my quiet time, and when is he going to go and into his business call.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, to the point of scheduling as well. I have also been working with some couples that, just to kind of neutralize the idea of everybody, needing personal time and
Mhm,
not waiting until, you feel like you're at a breaking point to ask
mhm,
for it. To just simply say, I feel like we both could probably use some personal time.
mhm,
So could we plan so that we both have a 90-minute period where we have the apartment to ourselves. And
mhm.
then it actually ends up then to being 3 hours of personal time because you have 90
Right.
minutes at the apartment by yourself. And then you have 90 minutes,
Mhm.
while you're out by yourself. Uh, for,
Yeah.
for people that are still able to go out at all, from what I
Mhm.
understand, there are some communities where people are not allowed to go outside.
Yeah, no, it's not an option, and I know that that's been extremely difficult for a lot of people. Is if your outlet was physical, and now you physically can't leave, and that's what it kicked off a lot of the what was going outside doing for you? What need was it? Because if it is just like I think better when I walk and I move, which that is me to a T. Is I think better if I can move, then can we talk about almost like mapping out a course in your apartment where you're doing this? Or was it getting out into nature, in which case, like some clients of mine have bought bird feeders and put it right outside to bring nature to them, or that this is their time that they like order a little window garden. So they're finding creative ways. I've actually been super impressed with how creative some people have gotten, with meeting their own individual needs, and we're certainly seeing it with video dating and family Zoom calls that like a lot of people are meeting those stronger needs for like emotional connection with other people, but then these smaller things of like I need, or maybe I should say more individual needs of I need nature in this specific way. They're finding ways of doing it, which I just think is really cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. Just to add to the list of ways to bring nature to you,
Hmm.
I recently ordered this myself because a friend of mine showed me what she did. Apparently, if you go on Amazon, which I did, and type in succulent plants
Hmm.
for like $30, you can get 10 tiny little succulent plants. And then,
Oh,
you can put them all over your house. Mine haven't arrived yet, but she said that they're like super soothing and it's really nice to have these 10 tiny little succulent plants for $30 from Amazon all over the house.
which I love that idea. I mean, I'm a big nature enthusiast, but I know also just a ton of research about how we respond to nature, and if you can't go out to it, like bringing it to you. I mean, really, you can make a very we've talked about making I might mispronounce this hygge krogs, that comfortable little corner. So for many people who feel like now I have to work from home, can we make it a very comfortable setting? Like now I'm excited to stay at home and work instead of I feel stuck at home. Uh,
Yeah.
so there's been so many different ways that people are doing what they need to do, and where it does get tricky is if you've got somebody else's needs, you also need to accommodate. But to your point, like being able to kind of have a sit down at the end of each night or the beginning of each morning and talk through sort of the day's agenda with your partner, I think can go a long way to ensuring that nobody ends up getting deprived.
Hmm. Yeah. Other ideas to keep, your space feeling a little fresher, that I wanted to share too, just kind of on that note, is number one is to rearrange your furniture.
Yeah.
And that can help a lot. Or to add some like aromatherapy, because
Mm-hmm.
that kind of can trick your brain into feeling like you're in a different place when you
Mm-hmm.
change the smell or when you change, the configuration of the furniture. I think those things can help. Another thing that some families are doing that I think is kind of fun is to take turns once a week or twice a week or whatever works for you with restaurant night. And it's each person's job, on a rotating schedule to have a restaurant. And, they name the restaurant, they serve the food. And, families may differ in terms of, if the restaurant person has to clean up, or
Mm-hmm.
if everybody helps. But whatever it is, it's across the board. So, if you might decide as a family, like, what, I just want to know that when I'm a guest at the restaurant, that's all I do. I just go and I'm a guest, and then the other other person, they cook and they clean and everything. And then I cook and clean when I'm the restaurant, just that everybody's, may have a different way of doing it. But I just think it's kind of another fun way, like, the restaurant person will, choose music and, just maybe even choose different dishes. And, again, just, I know we're kind of reaching here, but we do have to reach, in this particular time.
I agree. Like, I think this is exactly what I'm talking about, where it's like the creativity piece. Like, we can resist this and say that this sucks, and certainly there are many aspects that do, but also it's not really changing anything to only stay focused on that. I don't want to minimize how people are feeling, but in order to stay healthy and like really kind of endure this in the long term, we also have to find the silver linings or find the opportunities to have fun with this, and especially if you can have fun with somebody else. I think that it's a good way of like long-term plan of helping to stay healthy. Like, you can recognize the negatives, you should vocalize, talk to others about the negatives, allow yourself to feel frustrated, but we also want to almost lean into this reality. Denying it's not making it go away. And if we can lean into it in fun ways, like, I'm taking better care of myself now. This is my opportunity to get to know myself better. I think that you can find positives even in that difficult situation.
Yeah, definitely. I did some research when I was in graduate school on families that were homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And the research actually showed that families that were homeless tended to actually have higher levels of family closeness than families that were housed. And that's even controlling for the fact that a family that becomes homeless would, would be more vulnerable to just breaking apart. And so the mere fact of a family that could stay together through homelessness, that they would have to, be a close family to begin with. But even controlling for that, those families experienced, higher levels of closeness a lot of times than, families that had a lot of affluence. So, to your point, these times, they can bring us together for sure. I wanted to share a couple of other ways, that I think parents and families are working creatively here, because I think one of the things that parents do struggle with, to your point about wanting to not minimize what people are going through and to acknowledge that it's hard with the kids and for the kids, but at the same time, we do not want to collude with the idea that our children are going through such a terrible trauma that they can only be expected to respond with disrespectful behavior and lashing out and refusal to try and, just complete misery. We don't want to collude or reinforce that narrative to our children that that's a healthy, or even rational response, to this situation. Yes, it's very hard, but yes, we still have to have expectations for ourselves. It kind of makes me think a little bit about some of the DBT and, dialectical behavioral therapy skills. So to that point, I want to share just a couple of ideas that some parents have been doing with, teens and even, kind of somewhat younger, that's been helpful to try to set limits on them, right? Because discipline is something a lot of parents struggle with anyway. And then when you're in a COVID situation and the kids are acting out, and to a certain degree, you kind of understand, but at the same time, again, we don't want to do our children the disservice of allowing them to think that a tough time becomes a license for bad behavior that makes the experience worse for everybody, that's actually an unhealthy accommodation that might be tempting to make, but that's actually not in the service of our children, or even of the parents and their own healthy mindset. So a couple of thoughts that I have seen parents doing is, again, to the point of, giving chores or whatever, and having standards of, how we have to communicate with each other, even if we're frustrated. And sometimes parents will say, well, yeah, but what do you do if the kid, the 12-year-old just says, no, like, and what some parents have done is they've said, okay, well, we're just going to change the Wi-Fi password and you'll get it back as soon as your chores are done, which I thought was a pretty good one.
That's really good.
Yeah. Because it's kind of it's a little bit neutral. You're not kind of standing there and like yelling it out together.
Right.
It's that kind of letting gravity do the work thing. Another idea was to say, okay, well, if we have a good day and everybody's respectful, kind of as defined like by our family rules, and if
Mhm.
if everything goes well, then we'll be ordering sushi tonight.
Mhm.
And if things don't go well, then we're ordering sushi for daddy and me, and you kids are going to have peanut butter sandwiches. Yeah,
Yeah.
because to just say like these kind of luxuries and these perks are a reward. These are not essentials.
Mhm.
And if you're not really going to participate in the community here in the home, we just think that it's better than if there's some kind of a consequence, or
Yeah.
however you want to frame it, as a consequence for not, or as a reward, for doing it.
Mhm.
I thought that was a helpful way to think about it. And one more thing another person did that I thought was very clever. She has 4 boys that like to
Oof.
sleep in, really late, and all this stuff. And she said, okay, fine. I can't fight the rain. I have 4 boys if they want to sleep. So what
Mhm.
she does is every morning she posts 4 different chores, and they range wildly in terms of how difficult they are. And whoever gets up first gets to choose the chore that they want. They get up, they do the chore, and then they're done. And she said that it has really worked in terms of getting these boys out of bed.
That is brilliant. Hats
Yeah,
off to her. Wow. That
yeah,
I'm really impressed by that.
yeah, yeah. Well, I don't want to keep you, Amanda. I think we might be at the time that you had to run. Is that right?
We're getting close. If we need flexibility, we can take it, but we're
Okay,
getting
yeah.
close.
Well,
Mhm.
if you have any, kind of other thoughts or, things to share, and by the way, when you do get that Sesame Street episode, I hope you'll send a link, because
Will
I'd like
do.
to share that too. But if you have
Sure.
any other thoughts or ideas, I'm all yours.
All right. Oh goodness. I'm trying to think if there's anything that's just jumping out even from the past week. I mean, I myself kind of found that, the first week that all of this happened, some of the distress, like, because I could put my finger on it, I knew exactly why I was feeling so stressed. I almost felt more entitled to that stress, and I took better care of myself and vocalized what I needed more than in the subsequent weeks when things started to calm down. I'm finding that with other people as well. Like, now that the initial shock is over, some of these more like micro disruptions are flying under the radar. And it really wasn't until someone kind of held a mirror up to me and said, you sound kind of stressed, that I realized like what wear and tear this was actually putting on me, despite the fact that I feel very, very grateful for, how this happens to have played out for me personally, professionally. There's a lot I'm grateful for, and we were able to kind of get back into a routine relatively quickly. But I think that it's still affecting me in small ways that I hadn't realized, and having somebody kind of give me that that feedback was actually very helpful, because it allowed me to become more aware of how am I actually doing on the day to day, and finding, as you were saying earlier, like something more sustainable. And I think that that has become more and more so my conversations with a lot of my clients now, that you're allowed to feel fatigued, low energy, etc. Just from like the day to day small switches to your routine, or these smaller micro ways in which it's affected you. You don't have to be in active distress to still feel the fatigue of elevated stress in general. And I think even just recognizing that, like, we're several weeks in or months in, depending on your own personal situation, but it's not, the new normal is still not normal. And I think it's just important to recognize that, even as we're coming up with fun or creative ways and practicing gratitude, to still recognize that even if we're not in distress, or somebody else has it worse than we do, that it's still important to recognize how you're doing and demonstrate a lot of that self-compassion. And ultimately, because as we were talking about, you don't want to necessarily collude with, well, now I just get to be miserable for the next however long this lasts. It a lot positions you to actually take some action and do maybe a little bit more than you were doing before.
I think that's really great, Amanda. I think that makes a lot of sense, so that we don't want to get stressed about feeling stressed. We want to kind of normalize it that, like, yep,
Mhm.
it's a stressful time. And, now that I've just named the issue,
Mhm.
how can I be proactive around,
Mhm.
mitigating the stress in whatever ways that I can?
Yeah.
So I want to thank you for that. I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap up here. But Amanda Palcher, thank you so much.
You
I
are
really
welcome.
appreciate you taking the time to share.
No, thank you for inviting me on. This was a lot of fun.
Same here. We'll have to do it again sometime. Take
Sounds
care.
good. Take
Bye.
care.